Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here to see some familiar faces. It's been quite a while since I've been in this building, but I've had many happy memories here. Those of you who might know me, I am Shelley Klug, and I now work for Indiana Michigan Power. But a few years ago, I worked for Southwest Michigan Economic Growth Alliance, SMEGA. And then I had a turn at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So I've been in a lot of your offices and a lot of your companies, and this is familiar turf for me, and I'm really happy to be here. So I wanted to say we do have kind of a funny name. Our logo here showing has been American Electric Power, and a lot of you call us AEP, and there's probably a good reason for that, because our real name is Indiana Michigan Power, but our acronym is I&M. Doesn't make any sense at all. It should be IMP, so we don't know who we are, so we have an identity crisis. But AEP just rolls off the tongue, so you're perfectly welcome to refer to us as that. But as Zach mentioned, I am an economic and business development manager for our company, and really I am just side by side with our local partners. One of the main things that we're focusing on this year, Zach touched on it, and that does have a lot to do with site readiness. And so we can be a partner for that. We can look at helping our local partners and municipalities determine what sites might be the most amenable to a large company or an employer. And then we look at how can we bring the power there. And we're also, of course, investing in significant renewable energy resources this next few years, which a lot of these companies are asking for. We're entertaining a company right now that is asking to be 100% renewable. We're fortunate in the fact that there's still these renewable energy credits, so they're somewhat of a theoretical renewable resource, but they help pay for the actual renewable energy resources. So that does work together. So that's become an important piece of what we do. And so, like I said, our main goal is to work alongside of our local partners and our state partners to look for the site readiness. And I know we're going to be talking about a couple of those tools that Zach mentioned, brownfield and land banks. So I think this is a really great opportunity for all of us to start thinking again about our land use plans, our master planning, and where we might really think that we would like to try to site an employer that's new to our community, because a lot of times that is a very good way to keep our economy growing. We want to keep our existing businesses growing, but we want to bring in new types of industries so we can just kind of stay up with current trends. So it is my pleasure. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on that topic, because it is a near and dear one for me. It has been for over 20 years. And so it is very happy to come back here and continue this work. It is my pleasure to introduce Justin Horvath. He is with the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership. He's the president and CEO and has been there for over 20 years. That is the economic development organization, as the name would indicate, serving Shiawassee County, Michigan. And they, as we were talking about, also work to grow their local economy through a program of business, talent, and real estate development. Justin has been an active member of the Michigan Economic Developers Association since early in his career, including completing the Practitioners Training Certification Program, and he was the 2017 Medalist of the Year. Way to go, Justin. Justin has been an instructor for the Business Retention and Expansion and the Managing an Economic Development Organization for the basic course, which, by the way, we oftentimes are able to offer scholarships. And I think we've offered a scholarship to Zach to do that basic course. And in fact, Barry Diesel, if some of you remember him from way back, he paid for my way when he was with Indiana Michigan Power. He paid for my way to take that course. So there's just a continuing education piece I think is really important for us all to have those opportunities. Justin has also served on the MEDA board, including a leadership role as president in 2019. He is also a member and a certified economic developer through the International Economic Development Council. Justin received a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics, Master of Arts degree in applied economics, and a Master of Public Policy degree, all from the University of Michigan. I think that we are going to have a well-qualified speaker this morning. Let's welcome Justin Horvath.
Colors like that too for the amazing blue up there. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I might wander a little bit too, but I want to make sure we stay in the camera eye here, because I know there's some people that are going to be watching us virtually. I very much appreciate the opportunity to come down to the community. It was a little bit of a slow drive today. We had a little bit more of a snowstorm further north. So, but I was able to make it safely, and very grateful to be here. And I do want to start by saying thank you to the team. I've known Zach. Has it been 5 years already? Wow. You know, you have a great leader in Zach, and obviously you have a great team with him. You know, I guess I was the old guy then too, right? Because it was 15 years on the job. And we actually started collaborating through our state association, Michigan Economic Developers Association. And the thing that I noted about him was how much he wanted to learn. Participating in the events, talking to me, learning best practices, being able to get some nuggets of wisdom, I think, to be able to bring back here to the community. And I very much appreciated that about him. He's hungry to learn, hungry to serve. So I do want to say you got a great guy in Zach here. And I will say, and he touched on this a little bit, Shiawassee County, I don't know how many people know Shiawassee. I'm sure you've heard of us. We're between Flint, Lansing, and Saginaw on the Mitten. We are very similar counties here to Van Buren in a lot of ways. Population, you said it earlier, we are a farming and factory county. That's what I tell people. So my lens of which I'm talking today is very, very similar, I think, to the Market Van Buren lens in terms of what we're doing in economic development. So thank you all for being here. I told Zach, I said, I wonder if I could get this many of my government officials to a meeting like this. So this is a credit to all of you for being here. Because you're here, that shows your interest in economic development. So I say thank you to all of you for being here, and certainly for your support of the Economic Development Organization. And hopefully today, I'm going to give you all a few nuggets of wisdom. I have a lot of slides on this presentation. I'm going to go as quickly as I can. And let's see. You know, I'll try to get to as much as I can. Certainly, if you have questions, I think we have about an hour, right, Zach? Okay. If you have questions, just raise your hand and interrupt, because I want to make sure, you know, if you have something burning, that I answer that, or we can certainly wait until afterward. I will be sticking around for the rest of the morning. So if you don't get a chance to ask me something now, I will be around for that. But really what I wanted to do today, and Zach touched on it a little bit, he stole just a tiny bit of my thunder, not a lot, just a little bit. But this is really what I'll call the blocking and tackling, Economic Development 101. So for some of you, this may be brand new to you. For some of you, you may already know a little bit about it, but I really wanted to hit some of the foundational aspects of economic development. And so hopefully it's good information for you, and we'll get her going. All right. So really what I want to do today is answer several key questions. Once again, you may know some of these answers, you may not. But I think, you know, once again, I want to be able to set the foundation of what economic development is. So what is it? So we'll cover that. That's a pretty basic question. Who's involved, though? You know, who is actually part of the team? And we're going to cover that in quite a bit of detail as we go forward. You know, what is the actual work being done? We get that question a lot in our community. We know you're an economic developer. We know you're doing stuff with business and jobs, but like, what exactly do you do? Like, what are the duties of the job, right? So we're going to try to get into that a little bit. I did want to make sure we took some time to talk about governance. And really what I want to be able to do, I mean, I know this is a public sector audience, but I think it's important that the public sector folks kind of understand, like, what's the business sector think, the private sector, and then, you know, how do they work together? So I'm going to cover some of that today as well. So hopefully that'll give you some perspective. Hint, you got to work together. This is always a question. You probably get this from your constituents. Who pays for all this, right? I'm sure there's questions. Well, we're funding this economic development thing. You know, who pays for it? This is critical, though, to answer your constituents when you say you pay for economic development. You know, you got to determine, you know, what is success for the organization? What does that look like? You know, how do we know that the economic development efforts are working? So having that clear vision, I think, is important. And then finally, and I think this is huge, that I don't think enough economic development organizations across the state, across the country, I think Zach and his team do a good job of this, but how do you communicate that value? I think that's very, very critical. It's not enough to do good work. You've got to be able to communicate it to the people that matter, the stakeholders in the community. So those are the questions we want to try to answer today. Once again, this is not everything, but as I said, we want to try to sort of give a baseline and once again, jump in if you have any questions. So fundamentally, economic development is about supporting the growth of contributory employers in your community. And that really means three things. You have companies here, and Zach talked extensively about that. You want to support them. You want to help them stay here and grow here. You want to attract them. Shelley mentioned that. You also want to help small businesses that want to start or grow. But the key differentiator that we usually utilize in economic development, because all business is important, we know that, but the real key focus area typically for economic developers are contributory employers. And how we define that are businesses that sell their goods and services outside of the community, outside of the county, in many cases out of the state or even out of the country, and then bring money back into the area. So if you think about it, there's always money flowing out of the community, right? There's always money that's leaving the area. The only way you can grow your wealth, your bucket of wealth, if you think of it that way, is you've got to import money from outside the area, from out of state, out of country. So when you do that, when you bring money in from outside the area, that helps to employ people. It gives them a wage. They can shop at the local store, buy a car, eat out at a restaurant, bring more tax base. Obviously, that's very relevant to the local government folks in the room. All these things together really drive economic growth. I will say in our profession, and I'm sure this ED group has done the same, with COVID, we had to pivot a little bit. I know that's a little bit of a tiring word for people, but we had to pivot a little bit. We really went to helping all businesses in some capacity over the last couple of years. We still continue to do it. But, once again, all business is important, but the core focus of economic development really needs to be about those businesses that bring money in from outside the area. So you may say, well, what are some of these? And you probably have a good feeling already, but I just want to put a list up there. And once again, all of these in some capacity fit the category. So obviously manufacturing, we talked about that. And first two, manufacturing and farming. I did want to put in value-added ag, though. I think that's important. What I mean by that is it's not just about growing the crops or the milk or the meat. It's about how do we add value? How do we have food processing? How do we have, feed and seed and fertilizer businesses, things like that, because those also bring value in the agricultural sector to the community too. So that's definitely an area of focus, I know, for our organization. But really, those are the two categories I know we spend a lot of our time on. Information technology, we know things are getting faster all the time in terms of technology, software development. We've all been on Zoom calls and whatnot the last couple of years. There's a lot of opportunity for growth in this sector, computers, things like that. We don't have a lot of this. I don't know how much you guys have, but we do want to try to support it if we have it. The other thing I will say about this sector that I think is important, these are the kind of jobs that can be done anywhere. So if you have a computer, if you have a phone, you can be all over the world. So there could be a play for you in terms of talent, in recruiting talent to move to the county, or even you probably have people that are living here now that are working in IT for companies out of state. So that might be something you want to consider. Transportation, distribution, logistics, very similar once again. You guys are on 94, we're on I-69. We got a lot of truck traffic passing by all the time. So what does that mean for warehousing, trucking? We're in a very strategic spot within Michigan, both of our areas, quite honestly. So how do we take advantage of that? Healthcare, we know the situation in healthcare. We respect the challenges our healthcare system is dealing with COVID, but definitely a growth sector. They are a contributory employer. When you think about the fact that a lot of their money is Medicare and Medicaid and other insurance, that's dollars that are flowing in from state, federal government into your healthcare system in the community. Corporate headquarters, once again, I think this is something probably for both areas we don't have a lot of. These tend to be in larger, more metropolitan areas, but those certainly bring dollars in. And then destination tourism. That's people obviously coming into your counties and spending money in the area. So once again, I don't know exactly your tourism efforts here. We don't actually have a lot in our community, but it's definitely a driver. Okay, well, Zach talked about this, and this is really the key message today. Economic development is absolutely a team sport. We cannot do this alone. Zach's group can't do this alone. The local government people can't do this alone. There is a team, depending on the project, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But there is a team that has to come together to serve the businesses that you work with in the area. Why? And you see it here. Businesses have very, very different needs, and we're going to talk about those needs here in just a second. So really, that's the thing. If you take away, anything today, and I do have a few more takeaways at the end, but it's a team effort. We're all in this together. It cannot be done alone. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a lot. And I just, once again, I wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective. Who are the different players in economic development? And you're going to recognize a lot of these names. Some of them you may not. And I will say this. Sometimes it depends on the project who's involved. Not all of these people are in on every deal. It just depends on what the need is. But really, there are private organizations, public organizations, nonprofit organizations, local, state, federal. I mean, it's really a wide range. So once again, not meant to be exhaustive, but I just wanted to give you some of the, some of the key ones. Local economic development, obviously, Zach and his team, regional groups. So I just picked out a couple I know are prominent in this area, Right Place, Southwest Michigan First, MEDC. Is anyone here from MEDC today? I wonder. No, okay. Very, very key partner for us, our state economic development agency, both on the business development side and the community development side. And as was noted earlier, the site readiness program, which we can talk about more, that is being funneled through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Chambers of Commerce, government officials. So obviously a number of you, both staff and elected officials are part of this, but also state and federal government as well. I mean, we've been known to have to call in our congressperson from time to time to deal with certain federal issues or our state representative or state senator. So everyone's part of that. Workforce development, talent is number one. Zach talked about it briefly. There's a lot of different people in the talent world right now that are working very hard to try to address talent needs. Michigan Works, we all have one of those agencies. Different colleges and universities. We have Baker College in our community, but we're also close to U of M Flint, Kettering. Obviously, you're not far from Western Michigan here. I think the key thing, though, it's at the end, there's K-12. We have to do a better job, not only in the community, but I think the country, of re-engaging our kids in things where you don't have to go to college, right? I mean, this has been the message in this country for 20, 30 years. Well, everyone's got to go to college. We've got to move away from that model. We've got to focus more on manufacturing trades, building trades, construction, hands-on, welding, things like that, because I feel like we've been leaving a lot of our kids behind in this country by telling them all they have to go to a four-year college. So we are working very hard on trying to strengthen those relationships between the business community, between our local schools for vocational training, get the kids engaged early, get them visiting factories, doing co-ops, internships, things of that nature. That's where you got to get them, right? If we're going to rebuild our construction talent, our manufacturing talent, we got to get them at a younger age. So, and actually, I'll talk about it later. I actually have a copy of our newest business plan on the table over there, and it talks a little bit about our efforts in that arena. Utilities, well, I had consumers at DTE because those are the ones we work with, but obviously we heard from another one today. Transportation, right? We know about the roads, but MDOT does have economic development programs to help build roads and rail spurs as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And then, of course, working with the rail providers. And then, on the private sector side, and Zach talked about this a little bit too, about, where does a business want to locate? Well, and I agree with Zach. We do the same thing in our community. We don't pick. We provide information. We don't tell businesses where to go. However, businesses will come to us and say, I need a real estate agent to help me find some property. I need a developer to build me a building. Who do you got? And so we do come in at that point and talk to them about, who we work with in that regard. And then obviously bankers, money is the capital. It's the lifeblood of any business. So once again, if they have a bank, we encourage them to work with the bank that they have. But if they need other bankers or credit unions, other lenders, we maintain a Rolodex of that. And by the way, I used the term Rolodex with a 20-year-old the other day. They had no idea what I meant. So, right? It's long gone at this point, right? It's just a few other specialty agencies, but I think the first one is very relevant to this community as it is to ours, the Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development. They have different programs related to economic growth, different grants to help farmers, to help those processing type operations. So that's a good group to be with. The PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, what these folks do is they help businesses win government contracts. So a lot of people don't know the number one buyer of goods and services in this country is the federal government. They spend a lot of money. We know that. But a lot of companies, particularly small businesses, how do I do that? Who do I talk to? Where do I go? So there is a PTAC serving this community. I don't know who it is. Ours is run out of another region, but it's a great resource. These people work to help businesses in the area secure those contracts. And then MMTC, this is another state organization. They serve this area. I don't know who the rep is again, but their goal is to help particularly small and medium-sized manufacturers with different operational support, plant layout, lean manufacturing, things like that. So as I said, definitely not the entire list, but hopefully this gives you all a picture that there's a lot of players in this world. So, and I'll be happy to talk more about that, that later. And we're going to get into this actually right now. So what is it that we do? And I said this earlier, it's like people are like, well, you're doing stuff with business and you're helping jobs, but like, what do you do every day? So I want to give you sort of a high level, but then also sort of a nitty gritty level. And this is what Zach and his team are doing, every day for you in conjunction with you. At the heart of it, it's all about customer service delivery. That's really, really what it is in a general, fashion. And think of it this way. It's almost, and I didn't put this word in here, it's a little bit like a concierge service in that each business has specific needs. And we'll talk about what some of those needs are here in a second. But each business has specific needs. They need a customized concierge-like plan of assistance that the economic development team with its partners executes for them in a very, very timely fashion. Why? Because ultimately, to convince that business to invest in Van Buren County, Cass County, Shiawassee County, they have to be confident. My personal opinion, I think business confidence is the number one driver of economic growth in this country because businesses are the ones that create jobs. So they have to feel good about investing capital. So your job as a team is to reduce time, cost, and risk to them. They have to feel good about wanting to put $1 million, $10 million, $50 million into your community. So I think that's really, really important, to think about. And the last thing, though, and this goes along with it, is it shows that, this business, this developer, they are a priority to you. That you want them there, that you're rolling out the red carpet for them, that you're supporting them in their efforts. And that builds that confidence and trust again to want to be in the community. So, really, more specifically, and this is, once again, not meant to be a exhaustive list, but these are basically some of the things that, once again, Zach and his team are doing every single day, depending on who the company is. It's connecting resources. That's really what we are. There's team members involved, but ultimately you got to figure out what the needs are, what the resources are available, bring the team together and deliver those. So just some of the ones here that I wanted to note. And once again, it's been touched on a little bit already. Site location. We're not real estate agents, by the way. I get that question a lot. Are you a real estate agent? No, we're not. We don't charge a commission. I thought about it. I'm like, wow, we filled a lot of vacant buildings in our community. We probably could have made some money. No, actually, our goal is to, our business model in Shiawassee is help the broker that has the listing on the building get the deal, make a commission, then come back to them and say, be an investor in our economic development program. That's how we operate. Same thing with bankers as well. So, at the end of the day, it's like you want to bring people to your community, you got to have housing. You want to bring business to your community, you got to have a place to put them. So helping them find a building, build a building, expanding where they are in their current site, that is a real core focus for us. Financing, I touched on that before. This is just a list of different tools that are out there. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but apart from just the standard banking that's out there, and we do encourage, companies to work with banks, there are different tools at the state and federal level that are available to support some of those capital decisions. So, for example, SBA stands for Small Business Administration. So without getting into the weeds on this, they have programs through the Federal Small Business Administration that convince a local bank to do a deal for a project. That's an oversimplified version, but definitely something to think about. And once again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the rest of those, but there's different tools that are out there. Okay, incentives, grants, and abatements. This is someone to touch on a little bit later because we got a lot of government folks here in the room who may be questioning the value of tax incentives. Do companies need it? Do they deserve it? We get, flack sometimes in our community from our folks, from our constituents. Wow, that's corporate welfare. Why are we giving a business a tax abatement? I'm sure you've run into this or you thought about this. We're going to touch on that a little bit and how to maybe think about that here in a little bit. Grants as well. There's been a lot more of those, as Zach talked about. There's a lot of money out there right now. I was telling Julia, my board yesterday on an email vote actually agreed to bring on a contract grant writer. So not full-time, but contract grant writer to not only help our organization, but our communities access some of these monies. Because much like you guys and gals, we have a lot of small communities, rural townships, small villages, small cities that do not have the staffing to be able to take advantage of some of this money, to even know the money that's out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that service available to those small governments. Because my worry is the bigger governments that have more staffing capacity, that have grant writers, they're going to get money. And so we got to make sure we're doing what we can in our community to try to help our local governments get access to those dollars. Okay, so the other thing here I do want to touch on, not to go into too much detail, everyone knows it, talent, workforce, hiring, training. We talked about the K-12 a little bit earlier. I think that's really critical. Government ombudsman, once again, this is why we're here today. It's to build the communication between economic development and local government. But many times our businesses also have to deal with state government issues, federal government issues. It gets more bureaucratic as you go up, obviously. And so employing your state rep, your state senator, your congressperson, your senators, really, really critical to build those connections. And then just a few other things. We find ourselves doing this a lot, and this is really part of the retention program. As you get out and you meet with businesses, you learn about who they are, what their needs are. We've been doing this a long time. We've built up a lot of connections. So I spend a lot of my time where a business in the community calls me and says, hey, Justin, I need somebody that does this, and it could be a bank, a contractor, maybe they make something, but they know to give me a call and then I connect them and then they both win. They both make money and then they invest in our program. So that's a thing we definitely spend a lot of time doing. Education and networking. Zach said it today, education and networking. So this is what we do as economic development groups. We bring people together. Leadership development, we do something like this, a CEO roundtable where we bring people together. You are the government leaders of the area together today. So once again, not a comprehensive list, but I want to jump into now governance a little bit. And we're getting a little into the weeds on this, but I think it's good to have this perspective. Once again, you come at this event today from a public lens, obviously. Businesses may come at it from a little bit of different lens. And then there's the third lens, which is, I know our organization is this way, the public-private partnership lens. So just want to kind of talk on that. all these groups are structured differently. Of course, like Michigan Economic Development Corporation, that's a state government agency, so we know that. But really today is about the local EDO, which is who's bringing us together today. So, there's different structures here, and I'm going to try to, once again, kind of break it into a public, private, public-private. And so, once again, some of this stuff you're going to be very familiar with. Clearly, obviously, from a public sector standpoint, we have cities, townships, villages, county, all represented here today. And this is, and I should note too, this is typically when public bodies have their own organization. Okay, so it's once again just trying to give you perspective of how public groups are organized, and then we'll go a little further with that. So governance, once again, obviously for the public folks, this is easy. You have elected boards, you have appointed boards. There are typically a number of appointed boards to agencies related to economic development. Actually, two of them are on the agenda today, the Brownfield Authority as well as the Land Bank at the county level. So I think those are two groups that are very, very important. There's a few others here as well. And then, of course, the key piece here is you've got to be open. You've got to be public. This is an interesting thing. When I've talked about this with private sector people, a lot of them don't know this. In fact, I had a meeting 2 weeks ago. I won't say which town it is, but it was shocking to me. I had two business people call me about a half hour before the meeting. And they said, Justin, can I come to the meeting? Yeah, you can come to the meeting. Can I say something? This is a public body. It was a city in my community. And I was like, and these are two fairly well-known business people in our area. But they didn't even know they could talk at a meeting, that it was open to the public. I mean, this is the thing. This isn't, just a person off the street. These are business leaders that don't know this stuff. So I just wanted to throw that comment out to you because I think sometimes there's an assumption, that people, know what's going on and all that. And you probably all sympathize with this because I'm sure many of you probably don't have a lot of people attend your meetings unless they have something to complain about. Full disclosure, I should have mentioned this, put this in the bio. I was on Owasso City Council for 4 years. Early in my career, it was one of the best things that I ever did because I deal with business every day. But those 4 years I spent serving on city council taught me what it was like to be on that side of the table and to understand the needs and the public pressures of being an elected official. So that balance, once again, I've learned has been hugely critical in my career because every time I work on a project, I'm always thinking, okay, I want to support a business, but I also know what the public sector official has to deal with and budget constraints and public pressures and all that. So I'll remember to put that in my bio from now on. That was good. But just something to think about. Prominent business people don't know that these meetings are open sometime. Okay. Private, development, it's really focused on nonprofit. I don't know, quite honestly, of a for-profit economic development group out there. Typically structured as a 501c3. These are just IRS designations. Or a C6. A C3 is a charitable entity. According to tax purposes, a C6 is a nonprofit business association. And it's usually formed at a local level, or it could be at a regional level as well. But typically governed by a board of directors made up of different private sector constituencies in the community. Many of the ones that work through the economic development group are part of it. So your manufacturers, your bankers, your real estate people. So a mix of those typically. They're the opposite. Their meetings are closed. They're not subject to the Open Meetings Act. So they can have their closed door meetings and do what they want and say what they want. This is our organization. This is where you have to start to think about balance and the structure of that balance. So for example, with our board, we are 501c6, by the way, made up of representatives from both the public and private sector. I've got about 25 people on my board, probably about half and half public. And I should say public is not just government, it's also education. That is public education. That also qualifies as well. The meetings, interestingly enough, are private, They're not subject as a C6. They're not subject to an Open Meetings Act rule. However, the reality is, if any of you go to a meeting like this, the expectation is you will go back to your respective boards and report. And that is certainly something I have with my local government members on our board. Their job as a representative of their group is to go back to their regular township board meeting, village council, city council, county board of commissioners, and say, okay, what's going on with economic development? So striking that balance, I think, is key, just to make sure that we are aware of that. This is, I think, is very important, and this is where I want to spend a little more time on. And once again, all of these things you're going to hopefully recognize and appreciate every one of these things. Your job, obviously, is to be accountable as local government people to all of your taxpayers. You answer to all of them, obviously. And so have to keep that in mind when it comes to dealing with any type of economic development project. You have to weigh the pros and the cons as it relates to anything related to economic development and how it impacts those taxpayers. So, you really have to start looking at, as something comes in and you're evaluating something, maybe it's a new business or a new housing development, housing is touched on, that wants to come in your community. You really have to start looking at, okay, from an economic development lens, what does it bring in? I think that's certainly something that you have to look at. And not just taxes. Taxes are usually where people say, okay, well, what does it bring in taxes? That is definitely part of the equation. But what are the other benefits that might, come from such a development? And we know that, I think, intrinsically, it's maybe going to bring people. It's going to bring jobs. People with jobs spend money in the community. That strengthens local business. And I'll tell you another one, too, that we've been trying to do more of in our area is, and this is a little bit of an outside the box thinking. Most governments, at least in our area, I think in general, assume that business involvement in government is paying their taxes, right? But what we're trying to do is identify ways some of our businesses can go beyond that and do more for the community. So, for example, maybe, for your parks, you need something at your parks. You need a gazebo, you need something built or whatever. Well, maybe you have manufacturers in the community that could make something for you and donate it to the area. And what I found is we've had some success with that in Shiawassee County. And the reason why it hasn't happened a lot is they simply weren't asked. And it's just something to think about. And I'm just planting a seed here today. But there may be, for example, there are businesses, I'm sure, that donate to community events and things like that, sponsorships, but maybe there's more, that could be done out there. So that's just something you want to try to think about as part of it. Quality of life, I think that's important. The biggest rub that we see, and I'll be very upfront with all of you, one of the biggest challenges that I have in my community, and I don't know if Zach or if you all run into this much, is we are still fundamentally a rural county. We're 70,000 people, even though we're surrounded by urban centers. There are a lot of folks that don't want to see our county too developed, right? They don't want to see anything too big because they like it the way it is. They don't want to see too much change. And I agree. I'm born and raised in Owasso, in the community I live in. I don't think there should be growth for the sake of growth. I think the key, and I actually think the last point here is very, very relevant. I think the key is good planning, where you support business, you support development, you bring in business, bring in jobs, bring in people, but you do it in such a way that balances that with your current residents, with your current businesses. And that is really, really important. And I think you do that with proactive planning versus somebody shows up at your doorstep and they apply for rezoning and it's not in your future land use because maybe you haven't looked at your land use in 10 years because you haven't had any development pressure. I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking from my own experience in Shiawassee County because I've had this concern come up many times over the years. And so what we have learned, particularly, COVID obviously has put a bump in that, but particularly since, the economy started to revitalize, in the last 5 years, is that development pressure started. And we were, not I guess, ready, because it was like, okay, businesses want to come. Where do we want to put them? Who wants that development? Who wants that brand new industrial building? Who has the utilities and the infrastructure? That's another point here to consider. I could go on, and I got to be careful. I don't want to go over an hour. I want to be respectful, but infrastructure is a huge issue right now, right? I mean, we're trying to maintain what we have as communities. It's hard enough to do that. What happens if a business wants to come in and they need a new water line and a new sewer line and, a treatment? I mean, it's like, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I mean, there's just, so those are all factors that you have to consider as local government officials. And I think you do that by being proactive in your planning and really thinking about, and this is where Zach and his team, I know, want to take a leadership role in working with you, is figuring all that out. The reality is, I'm sure there are some government people in the room that say, come on in business. We have a great piece of land. We have a great building. Come into your community. Some of you probably are saying, not for us. We just want to stay farming with a little bit of housing. That's okay too. There's nothing wrong with either one of those. The key is that driven by good planning and good input for your community? So that would be another key takeaway I would definitely suggest to you today, because just like our county, I think you guys are in a great spot here. I think you got a great location. You got a great leadership team out there promoting the area. More opportunity is coming in. I'll leave with one story on this, because this just happened Monday night. I've got a developer in Owasso that wants to put in 120 apartments. They were in front of our city council Monday night, got approval to buy some property to do it. Very exciting. More housing for our residents. Same meeting, a consultant came in and said, we've analyzed your water and sewer rates, and we think you're going to need to raise them. And it was because infrastructure is getting old. They haven't had a lot of new users on the system. So, of course, my question is, does new housing, new residents, new water and sewer payers help? Absolutely. That just came up Monday night. So there's the thing here at a city council meeting: development, infrastructure, looking through all this, thinking about all this, finding that balance, I think. So I'd be happy to talk more about that story. Private sector, I want to spend more time on that because of the audience, obviously, that I have in front of me. But private sector, obviously, they're different. They're thinking about what's good for the business community. How do we, make money? How do we drive, job growth, capital investment, things of that nature? That's really a business-driven focus. This does, once again, lead into some conflict sometimes because, and I'm sure you've all dealt with this, and I have problem businesses like this who don't want to work with the government. They want to do whatever they want to do. And, you're not going to tell me what to do, right? And so you may have businesses and projects where they build something and, they didn't pull a permit, or, they're just, they're in code violations or things like that. That's an issue. It's an issue in our county. I'm sure it's an issue in places here too. Once again, sitting on that side of the table before, I don't just, even though I'm a passionate business advocate, I don't tell these businesses, oh, do whatever you want. No, I say, look, you need to respect the local government because they are doing what they need to do for their taxpayers. They can't show favoritism, toward you. So, but I put here too, though, one of the debates is, and we touched on this earlier, are things like incentives. When businesses come in front of you and say, we want a tax abatement or we want to do a brownfield, all that. There's, once again, some governments are like, yep, let's do it. We want it. Others are like, do we want to do it? This is where planning comes in again. One of the things that we have done in our county to help, particularly the governments that have the most economic development activity, is we've actually helped them institute tax abatement policies, tax abatement guidelines. So there's a set expectation, not guaranteed, but a set expectation when they come in for a project, they know generally what's available. That way you avoid things like favoritism, where maybe you grant one business something, you don't grant the other, and then the other business says, well, wait a minute, you gave this guy this, why can't I get that? If you have a good policy in place, that helps to absolve that concern somewhat. And then, once again, the balanced approach here, and I keep using the word balance, but I really think it's key because really what we have to think about as it relates to economic development, once again, is the public sector has a role to play. The private sector has a role to play. You need to work together. You need to be able to collaborate, because public sector, we want business to invest and create jobs. Government, business, we need the government to be respected. We need to, have you pay your taxes. We need you to follow the rules. We need you to be good community members. So what we've tried to do, I can say with our respective board, and I'll touch a little bit more generally later, but our board is that we've tried to create that understanding between the two, between the public and private sector. Okay, who pays for all this? Well, once again, I did break it down by public and private, but I have a takeaway here that I think is really important. So, once again, for this audience, you probably all have different ways you might support economic development. I would encourage you, if you're not, by the way, this is a plug for Zach here. If you're not an investor in the program, become an investor in the program. I will say that. But I did want to know there are different ways local governments can utilize dollars to support economic development. So obviously you have, general fund. That's typically the way that gets done. But sometimes you can use water and sewer funds. Sometimes you can use different tools. We talked about brownfield. We're going to talk about land bank a little bit. There is a state law. I put it in here. I'm not going to encourage it, but just so you know, there is a state law that allows the charging of a countywide millage for economic development. I think Gratiot County does it. I'm not sure, Zach, but that's a tricky one, obviously, because that requires a public vote, and we know the issue of getting millages passed. So we're just going to leave that right there, on it. And then I did want to note, and once again, I touched on this earlier, the financial challenges. Once again, I respect your situation. I ended my term on city council when everything collapsed financially for local governments. Because obviously in Michigan, we're all driven predominantly by property taxes. And we remember, I'm sure many of you were on your boards back in 08, 09, 10. The value of properties plummeted, home values plummeted, foreclosures, all that. We have not yet recovered from that. And I'm sure you all know that. You see a couple head nods, that's just a reality of the situation. So things have gotten a little better, obviously, but the many cases, the values have not risen back because of that limit on how much you can increase valuation. So that has to be considered as well. Private sector companies write the checks. And this is something, even though I'm talking to a room of government officials here, I will tell you businesses need to write more checks to economic development. Okay. Because at the end of the day, local EDOs in particular are getting direct service from the economic development community. Now, you see here, I talked a little bit about, how they give money. I mean, it is a tax benefit to them as well. If they have a C3, you can write it off as a charitable contribution. Even at C6, you can write off as a business expense. But the reality is, whereas local governments have been, once again, challenged with their budget, there's a lot of companies that have made a lot of money over the years. And I'll say if your economic development group has provided some level of service to them through a retention program or attracting them to the community, they need to write a check. And I will tell you, my organization went from a nothing organization with an initial budget through a capital campaign of about $250,000. We're up to about a $500,000 budget now. So we've doubled. And that growth has almost exclusively come from businesses we've helped. Okay. Because once again, we understand and we respect local governments. And I will reiterate, if you're not an investor in economic development as a local government, I strongly encourage it at some level. But the real opportunity for growth is in the businesses because they have more financial capacity. So I just want to note that, yes, COVID has had an impact on some businesses. A lot of them, though, have bounced back, not all. I've had a couple of my key companies who value us, but they're still down because of COVID. They've lowered their investment. They've not left us. But businesses need to support economic development. And then I think the key thing here, and I touched on this is our driving factor, is it needs to be both. Again, I think both the public sector and the private sector need to support. I actually think that is where the largest opportunity for financial growth is. And so we do a capital campaign. We do annual sort of during the year membership drives, but we kind of go out once every 5 years and ask for increased support from folks. And in fact, what you have at the back table there with Julie is we actually have a copy of our newest strategic plan, which we just kicked off this year. And we used that. There it is. Zach's modeling it over there. We use that to go out to the business and government community to sell what we're doing. We actually raised approximately $100,000 in new money from that last year. Okay, and once again, the public folks, you're going to appreciate this and respect this. For all EDOs, transparency and accountability is key. We have an audit done by a CPA every year. We have never had a finding. That's one of the proudest things in my organizational history I have, an independently audited financial statement with no findings. And I just think that creates transparency. You as government officials, if you got to go back to your constituents and they ask you about this organization, are you getting audited? I mean, I think, when you can say that, that creates trust. You've got to build trust with your constituents and ensures the money is being used wisely. So 2 more things and then I'll wrap up. What does success mean? So, I think, we've talked a lot already about it, but, so I'll try to be somewhat brief, through this, but each, again, constituency, public, private, has different value propositions. But once again, I think the public sector mindset, which is the group here, everyone comes to the table with something a little different in what they think is important when it comes to economic development, even within your respective boards. And I guarantee everyone in this room has a different viewpoint on what is important to them. I do think there are some things, and we touched on a little bit of this already, that, are sort of general things you can evaluate in terms of a project or supporting economic development. What does it do from a tax base? What does it bring in? What does it use? What are the public services that are required? What's that net benefit? Their employment. The other thing I'll say, employment, we're seeing more from our local government people. It's not just about jobs. We all know there's a ton of jobs out there right now. So our government folks, they really want to see businesses grow and jobs, but they want to see better paying jobs when they're evaluating projects. So that's certainly something that's coming up as well. And then, I touched a little bit upon the community aspect too, community benefits, giving back to the community. So I will say this, and I think you all probably deal with this in some of the votes that you make every day. Sometimes you can calculate it. Sometimes you can put a spreadsheet together and say, this is the tax revenue and these are the costs. But a lot of times it's a gut feeling. It's a knowledge like, yeah, that sounds like, and that feels like it's going to be something good for the community versus a tiny business that needs to have a whole new water system built. You're like, ooh, that's not really matching up. So it really is that gut feeling. Businesses, once again, are they making money? Are you helping them make money or survive COVID? That was something that we did a lot of. Once again, I'm sure Zach and his team did as well, just trying to help support retention. And I touched on this a little bit, not only the direct service, but if your economic development group brings in a contractor that's a local person and they build a building for that new business, they should be an investor. Zach and his team brings in a bank that does a loan for that business that locates here, they should be an investor. Okay, so those folks need to be at the table as well because they're getting something for this. They're getting economic value. I will say, I'm sure you have them here. I've got in my community, I'll call it the free rider problem. I've had some businesses say, well, you have to serve me because I'm in a government that they fund your program, so they expect you to help me. So I'm not going to pay you. I mean, that doesn't happen often, but it does happen out there, and it's disappointing because once again, I believe businesses, if they see value from this, they need to write the check. And then just finally with the public-private again, you've got to take into account both of this. But I think, once again, I've talked about this a lot today. The public sector, I believe, needs to do what they can to be welcoming to business, to development, to sort of roll out the red carpet, as I like to put it, in terms of encouraging businesses to want to invest in the area. Sometimes that means, sacrificing some resources, giving a tax abatement, things like that, making an investment in your water system, sewer system. But at the end of the day, and this is where we push hard on the business community, and I'm sure Zach and his team are as well, respecting all of your viewpoints as local government officials. They need to realize that you have responsibilities. You have taxpayers you report to. You have to pay for that infrastructure, for that police service, for that fire service. You need money for that. Businesses need to know that and invest in that, because that stuff does cost money. So, and then I talked about being a good community partner. Okay, finally, how do you communicate it? So I'm hoping all of you are feeling like, okay, this is important. We need to be involved in this. You know, we need to be at the table. But you also have to take this back to your boards, to your taxpayers. You know, the work that you're doing, the engagement that you have. And, you know, I think this is a challenge actually that a lot of economic development groups have, is communicating their value, you know, letting the key stakeholders in the community know what is it that you do. And so, you know, once again, most groups, they have numbers, they have data. Data is important. Numbers are key. You got to track that stuff. We track that stuff, you know, and then usually it's a written communication, it's an email, it's a paper report, you know, things like that. We do all of this, you know. However, and I think this is important, and I think we can all appreciate this, particularly in the last few years because of COVID. We live in an information overload world, right? Particularly with the phones, and things are beeping at us all the time, new articles coming in. One of my favorite quotes when it comes to numbers: there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And we've heard a lot of these, right? Mark Twain, you know, somebody told me it wasn't Mark Twain. It was some English guy, but not Mark Twain. But this thing always resonates with me, that while you have to track the numbers, I think that that's very important. I think there's a lack of believability sometimes in the numbers, because here's the other thing we hear. Well, you know, you said this company expanded and they created 20 jobs and they invested $1 million, but, you know, what did you do to help them? You know, did you help them? I mean, you're putting that in your numbers, but did you assist them, or are you just taking credit for that? We've heard that before as well. So what do? You do stories, you tell stories. And most importantly, you don't have the economic developers tell the story per se. You have the companies tell the story. You have them say, you know, in front of an audience like this, in a video, and I don't have time to show the video today, but I put a link to a video in here that you can look at. We put our businesses in front of the camera. That is one of the requirements we ask them for our help. We're like, will you tell the story of how we helped you? Because you as a constituency, if you get a report that says, you know, just numbers, that really doesn't mean a lot. But boy, if that business shows up and said, you know what, I invested $20 million in this county and it was due in large part to Zach and his team, then you're going to walk out of here feeling like, boy, they really did, because the business told me that. So I would encourage that going forward as you communicate, you know, to your stakeholders. There's nothing more powerful than telling that story. And so we do write stuff, but we do a lot of videos. In person is always the best, and it's great to see everybody in person. I'm glad we're here. Didn't want to have to do this on Zoom, obviously. But we do the videos, and the one I do, and Zach knows this, I'm very, very active on social media. I'm sure some of you are, some of you aren't. It has its pros and cons. We know that, but I'm very active on Facebook. I talk about these businesses all the time. I help promote local restaurants. You know, I just constantly get information out there about what's going on in our community. You can't do that enough. And won't have time for it, but that is a video on our YouTube page, SCDP TV, I think is the page, that shows one of these videos that we show to our stakeholders. And it's really this one, I think, is our companies talking about how we help them through COVID, how we plug them into resources, how we did all kinds of stuff. Once again, not me, the company's doing that. No more powerful value than that. Okay, wrap it up. Key takeaways. Well, once again, we've talked about a lot of this today. I mean, it's really all about a team effort, you know, working together, collaborating together. You know, we're all in this together. You know, I don't think, you know, and I wanted to give you a perspective of the public, the public, private. I don't think there's a right one or a wrong one. It really completely depends upon the community leaders, the quality of those leaders, the quality of engagement, you know, of those folks. I do think, though, the mutual respect, and hopefully you gain some, once again, some little nuggets today of what the private sector mindset is. Please know that, we as economic developers are trying to educate the private sector on what your needs are and what you're dealing with every day. But I think, each party has a key role to play. So collaboration, I think, is very, very critical. And then along with that, I think we're definitely on the fundraising side moving toward more of that model to have both public sector participation, public sector investment in economic development, and then private sector as well. Once again, on success, there has to be buy-in. There has to be a clear understanding of what is important to all of you. What do you need to have as stakeholders that says success, that says, you know what, I feel good about this project. I feel good about this opportunity, about this economic development effort. I will say, and I didn't put in here, but I'll reiterate, I think planning is key. I think being proactive, identifying what you want and need as a community for development, for housing, for commerce, industrial. Think about that now, and then leave here and go back to your boards and really, really give that some good thought. And then, finally here, once again, it's not enough to do good work. You have to be responsive to your stakeholders. You got to be telling them what you're doing. And I do believe telling those stories is the very best way to do it. So there's my contact information. I appreciate the time. I will be around the rest of the morning if anyone has questions, and Zach is walking up here to kick me off the stage. So Zach.
Well, if I had to say I had a big brother in this business, it would be Justin. He's been very good to me in the 5 years. Anytime I've had a question on how to serve you, he's always been there for me. And as you can see, some of the things that he's already further advanced than me in a lot of ways because he's been doing this longer. You can see I've tried to implement some of these things and model that because he's been very successful. But